The first time I realized something was wrong in my marriage, it wasn't because my husband yelled, cheated, or acted cold. It was because he became too perfect. That sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, I didn't question it. My husband, Ryan Miller, had always been a little distant, focused on work, normal married life busy. But then, almost overnight, he transformed into the kind of husband people on social media call a dream come true. He started bringing me coffee in bed every morning, texting me during the day just to say he missed me, cooking dinner even though he used to barely know where the kitchen was. Everyone around us noticed the change and told me how lucky I was. I even believed it for a while. But perfection, I learned later, is not always love. Sometimes it's preparation. The first crack appeared on a night that seemed completely normal. Ryan had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he went to shower, and a small notification popped up on the screen that caught my attention without warning. It said, "Policy approved. Beneficiary updated." I don't know why I clicked it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. But that single click changed everything. The screen opened a document that looked official, cold, and very real. Insurance policy under Ryan Miller's name. Insured. Jessica Miller, me. Coverage, $5 million. Cause of payout, accidental death or unexplained medical failure. Beneficiary, Ryan Miller, my husband. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, waiting for my brain to reject it as a mistake. People don't just insure their wives like that, I told myself. This must be something normal. A work thing. A misunderstanding. But then I saw the date. The policy had been created just weeks after our wedding. That was the moment my stomach dropped, because I remembered something important. That was also the exact time Ryan started changing. The sudden kindness. The attention. The calmness that felt slightly rehearsed, like he had decided who he needed to be around me. I heard the bathroom door open and panicked, closing the laptop too fast. That was my first mistake. Or maybe the second. Because my first mistake was marrying him without ever truly knowing who he was. That night, I lay in bed next to him, listening to him breathe like nothing in the world was wrong, while my mind replayed that document over and over. $5 million. Accidental death. Beneficiary him. It didn't feel like marriage anymore. It felt like structure. Like something built with an ending already in place. The next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work and told me to take care of myself. The way he said it stuck with me because it didn't sound like care. It sounded like timing. Like someone reminding me to stay in place until something was ready. After he left, I checked everything I could access. Bank accounts, shared documents, emails. And what I found didn't calm me down. It made it worse. There were small financial changes I had never been told about. New permissions. New access logs. Even medical clauses I didn't remember agreeing to. Nothing obvious enough to accuse him of anything, but enough to make my chest tighten because it all pointed in one direction. Control. That afternoon I did something I didn't tell anyone about. I followed him. I told myself it was coincidence that I just wanted to understand his routine. But when I saw his car stop outside a small insurance office downtown, something inside me went cold. He didn't hesitate when he went inside. He looked like someone expected, like someone known. I stayed in my car for almost 40 minutes, watching that door like it might explain everything if I stared long enough. When he came out, he looked calm, not stressed, not rushed, calm in a way that felt wrong, like something had been confirmed rather than discussed. That night, he cooked dinner again, set the table perfectly, poured wine, and played soft music like we were in a normal marriage. But halfway through dinner, he asked me casually if I ever thought about what would happen if something unexpected happened to me. I remember my fork stopping midair. Not because it was a strange question, but because it didn't feel like a question. It felt like rehearsal. I smiled anyway, because I didn't know what else to do. But inside, something had already shifted permanently. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked everything again. And that's when I found it wasn't just one policy. There were multiple. Different versions. Different updates. Same outcome. Me gone. Him benefiting. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't confused anymore. I was certain of one thing. My husband wasn't building a future with me. He was building a future without me. And I had no idea when that future was supposed to begin. The next morning, Ryan acted like nothing had changed, but I noticed something I couldn't ignore anymore. He was watching me differently. Not in a romantic way, not in a concerned way, but like someone observing a process they were trying to understand more precisely. He stood in the kitchen making coffee, calm and controlled, and asked me simple questions that suddenly felt loaded. Did you sleep okay? Did you drink enough water yesterday? Are you feeling dizzy at all lately? At first it sounded like care, but then I realized he was documenting my responses in real time, like he was checking whether I still matched something in his plan. I laughed it off, because that's what you do when you don't want fear to show on your face. But inside I was paying attention to every detail now. Every movement felt measured. Every sentence felt like it had a second meaning hidden underneath it. After he left for work, I didn't waste time. I checked his digital activity again, this time deeper than before. What I found didn't just confirm my suspicion, it expanded it. There were repeated visits to the same 3 places: an insurance office, a private financial consulting firm, and a pharmacy I had never heard of before. The pharmacy part is what unsettled me the most, because it didn't fit the pattern of money or paperwork anymore. It felt physical, real world, something connected to my body, not just my name. I tried calling his office under a fake reason, pretending I needed to confirm his schedule, and his assistant casually told me something that made my chest tighten. He had not booked any meetings for the entire week. Not a single one. Which meant every work late excuse, every urgent meeting, every time he left the house recently had been something else entirely. Something untraceable from my side. That evening, when he came home, he brought flowers again, but this time I noticed his eyes first before the flowers. He was checking my reaction as he handed them to me, like he needed confirmation that I was still emotionally aligned with the version of myself he expected. Long day? I asked carefully. Same as usual, he said, but the way he said it didn't match a normal day at all. It sounded like repetition, like a script he had used too many times. That night, I stayed awake longer than him again. I listened to his breathing, but now I was doing something else too. I was mapping patterns. He always checked his phone at exactly the same times. He always slept slightly lighter after certain days. He always became more affectionate after returning from specific locations. It wasn't random. It was structured. And structure always means design. Around 2 a.m., I quietly got up and checked something I hadn't thought of before: our shared insurance portal history. That's when I saw a new update I hadn't seen before. A clause had been added under my policy. Accelerated payout conditions may apply under verified medical emergency circumstances without prior consent. I stared at those words for a long time. Medical emergency circumstances. Without prior consent. That wasn't insurance language anymore. That was permission. My hands started shaking for the first time, but I forced myself to stay calm. Because panic doesn't help when you are still inside the house of the person you are starting to fear. The next morning, I noticed something new again. Ryan had started timing my routines. Not in an obvious way, but subtle enough that only someone paying attention would notice. When I woke up, he would ask how long I slept. When I ate, he would casually ask what time I had dinner the night before. When I mentioned feeling tired, he immediately suggested I get my blood work checked soon. That last one stayed with me longer than it should have because it wasn't concern, it was direction. Like he was steering me toward a specific outcome. I realized then something I didn't want to admit. He wasn't just planning something around me. He was adjusting me, like a variable in an experiment. That afternoon, I followed him again, but this time I was more careful. He didn't go to work like he said. Instead, he drove straight to a medical diagnostic clinic on the edge of town. I watched from across the street as he walked in like he belonged there. Like this wasn't his first visit. I stayed in the car for a long time, and when he came out, he was holding a small folder. Not large enough to be dramatic, but heavy enough in meaning that I felt my stomach tighten instantly. He looked around once before getting into his car, like someone making sure they weren't being watched. But I was watching. And that's when I realized something that made everything worse instead of better. My husband wasn't just preparing for something to happen to me. He was confirming that my body could still produce the result he needed. And if that was true, then I wasn't in the middle of a marriage anymore. I was in the middle of a countdown I hadn't been told about. And I still didn't know how close I was to zero. The call came at exactly 2:11 a.m., and I knew instantly it wasn't random because nothing in my life had felt random since I found that insurance policy. My phone screen lit up in the dark room with an unknown number labeled Private Medical Review Unit, and my entire body went still before I even answered it. Ryan was asleep next to me, breathing evenly, completely unaware, or pretending to be. I quietly got out of bed, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door before picking up. A woman's voice came through immediately, calm and professional, like she had done this 1,000 times. "Is this Jessica Miller?" she asked. My throat tightened. "Yes," I replied. There was a short pause, like she was checking a file she wasn't supposed to explain. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "This is a confirmation notice regarding your policy status. Your file has entered final review stage." Final review stage. I repeated the words in my head, trying to make them sound normal, but they didn't belong in any normal conversation about life insurance. "What does that mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. She lowered her tone slightly. "It means the policy conditions are nearing eligibility for claim activation based on predefined incident criteria." My mind struggled to process it, but one thing stood out clearly: incident criteria. That didn't sound like life. That sounded like a setup. "What kind of incident?" I asked. There was another pause, longer this time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "Accidental fatality classification or medically untraceable event." I gripped the bathroom sink so hard my fingers went numb. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. Her response was immediate. "We are required to confirm awareness due to recent policy adjustments." And then just like that, the line went dead. No goodbye. No instructions. Just silence. I stood there staring at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. Because now I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't suspicious anymore. Something had officially moved forward without my permission. And then I heard it. A knock on the bathroom door. Soft. Controlled. Ryan's voice followed immediately. Calm and almost gentle. "Jessica, who were you talking to?" My heart stopped. He wasn't asleep. Or worse, he was awake because he already knew the call was happening. I opened the door slowly, trying to control my breathing. He was standing there with his phone in his hand, watching me carefully, like he was checking my reaction against something only he could see. "Insurance calls at this hour?" he asked with a small smile. That smile wasn't confusion. It was confirmation, like he had just verified something. I forced myself to act normal. "Wrong number," I said quickly. He nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "You should get some sleep," he said softly. "You've been tense lately." Tense. Not worried. Not stressed. Tense like a condition being monitored. That night I didn't sleep at all. I lay there listening to him breathe beside me, realizing something terrifying. That phone call wasn't a warning. It was a checkpoint. A system update. And I had just passed through it without knowing what the next stage was. The next morning, Ryan was back to normal. Coffee, smile, soft voice, perfect husband routine. But now I was watching differently. And what I saw made everything worse. He wasn't just being nice anymore. He was timing me. When I ate. When I spoke. When I hesitated before answering questions. Like he was measuring consistency. Like he was tracking deviation. At one point he casually said, "Maybe you should get a full health screening soon. Just to be safe." And he smiled when he said it. That was the moment I realized something crucial. He wasn't hiding fear anymore. He was guiding outcomes. That afternoon, I secretly checked our insurance account again. There was a new update I had never seen before. A line added under my file. Trigger conditions approaching verification threshold. Verification threshold. My chest tightened. That wasn't language for life insurance. That was language for execution readiness. And then something else hit me even harder. The last access log showed my medical data had been reviewed the same morning as the 2 a.m. call. Someone was actively syncing my body with the policy conditions. I closed the laptop slowly, my hands shaking now for real, because the illusion was gone. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was coordination. That evening, when Ryan came home, he kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong, but I noticed something new in his eyes. Satisfaction. Like someone who had just passed another phase of a plan without resistance. And as I stood there pretending to smile back, one thought kept repeating in my mind louder than everything else. I wasn't trying to figure out if my husband was dangerous anymore. I was trying to figure out how close I was to the moment he would decide the incident had finally arrived. The moment I realized Ryan had already started the next phase, I wasn't in the house anymore. I was inside his timing. Everything he did now felt like part of a sequence I hadn't agreed to join. That morning started too normally, and that's what scared me the most. He made breakfast, kissed me goodbye, and even laughed at something I said, but I was watching for one thing only now: deviation. And there was none. He was too consistent, like a man following a script that had already been finalized. After he left, I checked my phone and found something new that made my stomach drop instantly. A message from an unknown number. No text. Just a location pin. Attached was an address, the same medical diagnostic clinic he had visited before. My first instinct was to ignore it. My second instinct was worse. I opened it. And that's when I saw the note underneath. Miss Miller, your follow-up screening has been scheduled by request of your insurance provider. My insurance provider.
Not me.
Not Ryan. Someone else was acting on my file now. I didn't wait. I drove straight there. The clinic looked normal from the outside, too normal for what I now suspected. Clean glass, polite staff, calm atmosphere, the kind of place where nothing dangerous is supposed to happen. But I had learned something important about places like this. The danger is never in how they look. It's in who sends you there. At the front desk, the receptionist already had my name printed on a form before I even spoke. That was the first real confirmation that this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. I hadn't booked anything, but I was expected. Just routine tests, she said casually. Your husband requested priority processing. My husband requested. Not me. Not insurance. Him. That name was everywhere now, like he was standing behind every door I walked through. I sat in the waiting room trying to stay calm, but my heart wouldn't slow down. Every few minutes, I kept thinking the same thing. What if this wasn't about discovering something but confirming something? What if my body itself was part of the plan now? A nurse finally called my name. The hallway she led me down felt longer than it should have been, like distance itself was slowing me down on purpose. She asked me basic questions, but I noticed something strange. She wasn't entering them like normal records. She was checking boxes already filled in. My file existed before I walked in. When she asked me to sit for blood work, I saw a sealed packet on the tray. My name was already printed on it. My date of birth was correct. Even my insurance ID matched. I felt a wave of nausea, because this wasn't preparation. This was replication. Someone had built me into their system before I arrived. As the needle went into my arm, I kept my eyes on the nurse's face. She looked calm, professional, too calm. Like this was just another step in a process she didn't question anymore. That's when I noticed something on her screen. A label next to my file. Eligibility confirmation, sample, expedited review case. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing. What does that mean? I asked quietly. She didn't look up.
Just protocol, she said.
But her hesitation told me everything. I left the clinic 30 minutes later with a cotton bandage on my arm and something heavier in my chest. Because now it wasn't just insurance documents or phone calls. It was physical. My own body was being processed like evidence. That evening, Ryan came home earlier than usual. And he wasn't alone. He had a second man with him, someone he introduced casually as a financial consultant. But I noticed how carefully that man looked at me. Like he wasn't meeting me for the first time. Like he was verifying I still matched a profile. Just a quick visit, Ryan said, smiling. We're updating some important details for the future. The future. That word felt wrong in his mouth now. The consultant asked me simple questions at first, lifestyle, habits, health routines, but slowly, the questions became more specific. Do you ever experience dizziness? Have you had recent changes in sleep patterns? Any unexplained fatigue? And then the final question hit like a trap snapping shut. Have you recently been alone without supervision for extended periods? I froze. Ryan was watching me carefully now. Not reacting, watching. That's when I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was verification. I forced a small smile. I work from home sometimes, I said carefully. The consultant nodded and wrote something down immediately. No discussion. No clarification. Just recording. And in that moment, I understood something chilling. My answers didn't matter. My presence did. After they left, Ryan hugged me longer than usual. Too long. Like he was confirming something through contact instead of words. You're doing great, he whispered near my ear. And my blood went cold. Because that didn't sound like a husband. It sounded like someone confirming a system was still stable. That night, I didn't sleep again. I sat in the dark, replaying every interaction, every question, every document, every smile. And one thought became impossible to ignore.
I was no longer being prepared for something.
I was already inside it. I just didn't know when the final step would activate. And the worst part was, I could feel it getting closer. In the days after I discovered that life insurance policy, everything about Mark Davis felt different, but not in the way most people would expect after a betrayal like that. He didn't become cold or distant. He became perfect. Too perfect. Every morning I woke up to breakfast already made, my coffee exactly how I liked it, and his soft voice asking if I'd slept well. He started texting me during the day just to say he loved me, sending flowers to my office with handwritten notes that looked almost desperate in their sweetness. To anyone else, it would have looked like a man deeply in love with his wife. But to me, it felt like I was living with someone trying to erase a mistake before it got discovered. I kept replaying what I had seen at the insurance office, the policy taken out in my name for a shockingly high amount, his signature clean and confident on the papers like he had been planning it for a long time. And now this version of him, this perfect husband act, it didn't feel like love. It felt like control. I didn't confront him.
Not yet.
Because I needed proof. Real proof. The kind that doesn't just raise suspicion but destroys denial completely. So I smiled. I acted normal. I even leaned into his affection like nothing was wrong. But behind that smile, I had already started building my own silent plan. I installed a small voice recorder inside my home office, hidden inside a fake power adapter. I told myself it was just paranoia, but deep down I knew something was coming. And then it started. One night, I woke up around 2:17 a.m. and realized the bed beside me was empty. The house was silent, except for a faint sound coming from downstairs. Slow footsteps. Then the soft click of a drawer opening. I didn't move. I just listened. My heart was beating so loudly, I thought he could hear it from upstairs. I quietly grabbed my phone and opened the home security camera app, my hands trembling as I switched between feeds. The living room was empty. The kitchen, too. But then I saw it, the garage camera. Mark was standing near my car, holding something in his hand. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not at that hour.
Not like that.
He looked around carefully, then leaned inside my car for a few seconds before stepping back and wiping his hands on a cloth. My breath stopped. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew it wasn't normal. When he came back upstairs 10 minutes later, he climbed into bed like nothing had happened. He kissed my shoulder gently and whispered, "Go back to sleep, baby." I closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went straight to my car. At first, everything looked fine. But then I noticed a small detail. The passenger seat had been adjusted. Not by me. And there was a faint smell, metallic, almost chemical. That was the moment I knew I wasn't safe anymore. I called my best friend Rachel later that day under the excuse of a normal coffee meetup, but what I really did was ask her a question that made her laugh at first. If your husband suddenly became perfect overnight, would you trust it? She stopped laughing. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "No, because nobody changes without a reason. They either got caught or they're planning something." That sentence stayed in my head like a warning siren. That night, I tested him. I told Mark I had to go out of town for work for 2 days. It wasn't true. I parked my car 2 blocks away, and came back quietly through the side entrance of our neighborhood. I didn't go inside the house. I went around it, and what I saw through the back window made my stomach drop. Mark was in my kitchen, not cooking, not cleaning. He was on the phone, and he was angry. His voice was low but sharp. No, she hasn't signed anything yet. I need more time. No, you don't understand. If she finds out now, everything is gone. I couldn't hear the other side of the call, but I didn't need to. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone when I started recording. Then suddenly he laughed. A short, cold laugh I had never heard from him before. Relax, he said. It will look like an accident. She won't even suffer long. My entire body went numb. I stepped back slowly, trying not to make a sound. But then the floor creaked behind me. I froze. The back door opened. Mark stood there looking right at me. No surprise. No panic. Just calm. Too calm. You weren't supposed to hear that yet, he said quietly. And in that exact moment, I realized the perfect husband was never real. It was never love. It was timing. And I had just run out of time. And then his phone rang again, and this time, the caller ID made my blood turn cold. The phone kept ringing in Mark's hand, vibrating like it had its own urgency, but neither of us moved at first. The name on the screen wasn't saved as a contact, just a number labeled insurance follow-up. That was all I needed to see to understand that whatever I had overheard earlier wasn't just talk. It was active, real, planned. Mark slowly looked down at the screen, then back at me standing in the dim light outside the kitchen door. The calm expression on his face didn't change, but something in his eyes did. It wasn't panic. It was calculation. Like he was deciding which version of reality to choose next. I took one step back instinctively, my hand already gripping my phone. The recording still running. Don't, I said quietly, even though I didn't know what I was asking him not to do. Not to answer? Not to lie? Not to become what I already knew he was? He gave a small, almost tired sigh and finally answered the call. Yeah, he said simply, turning slightly away from me. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I heard enough in his responses. No, she's here. I know. I'm handling it. My stomach twisted. Handling it. Like I was a situation. Not a person. Not his wife. Just something to be handled. When he ended the call, the silence between us became unbearable. I stepped fully into the kitchen now, forcing myself not to show fear, even though every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run. Who was that? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly to the counter, placed his phone down, and looked at me like he was almost disappointed. You shouldn't have come back early, he said softly. That was when I knew I had been right from the beginning. There was no misunderstanding. No innocent explanation waiting to be discovered. Just a timeline I had interrupted. I backed away another step, closer to the hallway. Mark, what did you put in my car? I asked. He didn't deny it. That was the most terrifying part. He just exhaled and said, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Those words hit harder than any confession, because they didn't sound like guilt. They sounded like frustration. Like I had ruined his plan by noticing it too early. My mind raced. Insurance policy. Late night garage activity. Chemical smell in my car. Secret phone calls. Everything clicked into place like pieces of a nightmare I had been refusing to see. I slowly raised my phone higher. Everything you just said is recorded, I told him. For the first time, something flickered in his face. Not fear exactly, but annoyance. Like I had forced him to change strategies mid-game. You always were good at details, he said quietly. Then, he took a step toward me. I stepped back immediately, my shoulder hitting the wall. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might drown out everything else. Don't come closer, I said. He stopped. For a moment, he just looked at me. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not a warm smile. Not even a fake one. A thin, controlled smile like someone acknowledging a fact they had already accepted long ago. You think you've figured it out, he said. But you haven't seen the whole picture yet. Before I could respond, headlights flashed through the kitchen window outside. A car had pulled into our driveway. Neither of us moved. The timing was wrong. It was too late at night for visitors. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see through the glass. A black SUV. No plates I recognized. Mark noticed it too. His expression changed for the first time that night. Not panic. Not guilt. Focus. Then he whispered something that made my blood go cold again. You were never the only one involved. My throat tightened. What does that mean? I asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, he walked past me toward the front door. Calmly, like he had already accepted what was coming next. I followed him without thinking, my body moving before my mind could decide. Mark, stop. I shouted, but he didn't. He opened the front door just as the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The kind that don't ask permission. They announce consequences. Mark opened it fully. And standing there wasn't a stranger. It was someone I recognized from the insurance office. The man who had processed the policy. He looked at me briefly, then at Mark, and said one sentence. It's time to finish the arrangement. That was the moment everything I thought I understood about my marriage collapsed completely. Not just betrayal. Not just money. Something structured. Something planned long before I ever noticed anything wrong. Mark turned slightly toward me, his voice almost gentle now. I told you, he said. You were never supposed to find out like this. The man in the doorway stepped inside. And I realized this wasn't the end of a discovery. It was the beginning of something much bigger than my marriage. And I was already inside it. As the man stepped further inside, the air in the house felt heavier, like every breath had suddenly become dangerous. I tightened my grip on my phone, my mind racing through one clear thought. I needed to get out of this house right now. But Mark was still standing between me and the only exit that mattered. The insurance man didn't even look surprised to see me holding the recording. Instead, he calmly closed the door behind him. Like this wasn't an interruption, it was a scheduled meeting that had finally arrived. Mark glanced at me, then at him, and said in a low voice, "She has the recording." The man nodded slowly, almost amused. "That's fine," he replied. "We expected that." My stomach dropped at those words. Expected it? That meant I was never reacting to a situation. I was walking inside one. I forced my voice to stay steady. If anything happens to me, this recording goes to the police immediately. That was when Mark actually laughed once, quietly. Not mocking me, but pitying me. "You still don't understand, do you?" he said. The insurance man took a step forward and placed a folder on my kitchen counter. My name was printed on it. My full name. Like it had been waiting there for me long before I ever knew fear was part of my own marriage. "Listen carefully," he said calmly, "because this is the part where most people either panic or save themselves." And that line hit differently. Because for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about exposing them anymore. This was about survival. If you're watching this story right now, stop for a second and ask yourself, how well do you really know the people closest to you? Because in this moment, I realized the scariest lies aren't told by strangers, they're built slowly by the people you trust the most. I took one slow step backward toward the hallway, keeping my eyes on both of them. My voice finally broke slightly. "What do you want from me?" The insurance man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the folder. Inside were documents, signatures, dates all tied to my life. My car, my health records, even my work schedule. And then he said the words that made my blood run cold again. "We don't want anything new," he said. "We just need you to follow the version of the story already written." My chest tightened. "And if I refuse?" I asked. Mark finally spoke again, softer this time. "Then it stops being a story and becomes an accident report." The silence after that was unbearable. Somewhere outside, a car engine started. Not the SUV. Something else. Something waiting. I realized then that this house wasn't my safe space anymore. It was the final scene they had already prepared. I looked at the kitchen knife block behind them, the front door behind Mark, and the narrow hallway behind me. 3 directions. All wrong. But I wasn't just standing there anymore. I was choosing. And whatever I chose next would decide whether I walked out of the story alive or became another name in that folder on the counter. And right as I made my decision, the lights in the house suddenly went out. The moment the lights went out, everything turned into pure darkness, and that's when I realized this wasn't just a trap anymore. It was a countdown. Somewhere in the silence, I heard movement slow, deliberate, getting closer. And if you're still watching this right now, let me ask you something important. Do you think she makes it out of that house, or was she never meant to? Because what happens next is not just a twist. It completely changes who is really controlling the story from the very beginning. Stay with this story till the end, because the truth behind that insurance policy is even darker than anything you've heard so far.